event room from the waiting area. Wonder if you could just let me know if you can hear me, okay, and see me. Hi, everybody. I hope it's a lovely day wherever you are. Great. Ecuador, we've got people from everywhere. Latvia, Portugal. Lovely. So my name is Amy Malloy. I am here to share with you an extra step in our 6 steps to exam success. And today we're going to be talking about mindset and really enveloping all of those 6 steps in a little bubble of relaxation so that the mindset is in just the right place to not only perform in an exam scenario, but also to take on information, new content. Okay, so I'll be talking through what we're going to cover in a moment. But before we get going, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So first of all, the session will be recorded. So within the next 2 days, you will receive an email with the recording link. There will also be a certificate of attendance sent. So within the next 2 days, you will receive an email with a link to your personalised certificate. And of course, I would love to hear your questions and your comments. So please do, we'll have a section dedicated to questions at the end of our webinar. So do share those questions in the chat box at the end of the session. Okay, so let's get going. So today we're going to be looking at the mindset in an exam preparation scenario. So we'll be looking at providing a really clear definition of mindfulness and exploring exam stress and the effect on the student brain. So actually, why do we get stressed about exams? And when we understand really the crux of the reason behind that, we can start to apply lots of different solutions to helping resolve that and reduce stress in an exam situation. And we'll look at how mindfulness practice in particular can contribute to clearer thinking. We'll also look at a couple of practical goes at different types of meditation practice that we can use in preparation for exams, and a little SOS practice that we can do for stress during the exam itself when the student finds himself in panic mode. And then we'll look from a teaching perspective at how we can integrate mindfulness techniques into your exam preparation course teaching. Okay, so let's get going. It's going to take a little look at exam mindset generally. So we've got our lovely little girl here, okay, who is sitting on the grass, and there's lots of things around her. There's a lovely tree, there are some birds. Yes, I am an artist. Not really, but I thought I'd share my artwork with you today. She's sitting there with a lovely flower, soft grass under her feet. And what we can say about all the things that are around her that she can see and that we can see is that they are real physical things in nature. Okay, you can touch them, you can see them, and the people around you can see them. Okay, so they're real physical sensory experiences. But what if I were to tell you that there were some other things around her as well that we can't see? There's expectations all around her, little measuring sticks that are set up by society and by ourselves against which we judge and compare our current situation. It might be If it's an adult, their career and their salary. It may be their exam results and what they want to do when they're older, pressure to find a career. It could be religious and political beliefs, what they believe, what their society would like them to believe, or what they feel they should believe. It can be emotional state. So whether they're happy or sad, and whether they're expected to be or feel that they're expected to feel a certain way. It could be what they look like. And if they're a parent, if they're an adult, it could be how they're raising their child. So there's lots of different expectations that we have all around us in society. And they're not real. They're all created by the social construct, by society. And yet they have as much power over us, and they seem as real in our mind and as factual and as taken for granted as that tree and the birds and the flowers that we see around us. So why is this, and what does this do to the mind? If we look here, we can see that particularly in a school situation, in an exam situation, those measuring sticks might apply to friends and social media comparisons, the actual requirements of the exam itself, parents' expectations, and the school or institution's expectations. So what we can see is these little measuring sticks have 2 points on them, one of which is where the student is, and one of them is where either they or others might expect them to be. And between the two is a smaller or larger discrepancy. And our mind is very aware of that discrepancy. It is designed, it has what's known as a discrepancy monitor, where it notices where we are and where it wants to be. And it notices the difference between the two. Now, the problem is that we then get stuck in a bit of a spiral. So this discrepancy monitor continually monitors and evaluates us against our current situation, evaluates our current situation against a model or a standard. Once switched on, it then finds mismatches, as we've seen, this discrepancy between how we think things are and how we think things should be. And as you can see, what happens is we can go round in a spiral between the bottom dot and the top dot on that little measuring stick. And we think, okay, it's like this, it should be like this. How do I change it, how it is, to be like this? So I need to change this. Is it like this? No. And we go round and round in circles, as we can see, and we get into a bit of a pickle. And that is where the stress can come from. What happens when we start to build up this sense of not being able to meet a social requirement, an expectation, can be a sense of stress. There's a sense of fight, flight, or even freeze where you can't do anything at all. You can't even fight or flee. Adrenaline and cortisol gets released in the brain, which adds to this feeling. We get the beating heart, shaking, shortening breath, and it's really difficult to even, you might find your mind goes blank. So we can't recall memories or even really use our language properly. Mindfulness can help shift us out of this mindset, and that's what we're going to look at today. So looking at that panic situation around exams and discrepancy, and seeing how we can use mindfulness and see exactly why it's a really great tool to specifically target that problem. So before we start to look more into why that stress situation exists, what do you think exactly is mindfulness? So some people may have an assumption that mindfulness is like this chap here, sitting on a lovely rock, looking very, very peaceful, and having a lovely meditation session, which is true. So he looks like he is taking part in a meditation practice. However, he's not necessarily being mindful right now unless he is focusing clearly and objectively on the present moment. Okay? Because meditation is simply a vehicle from which to access a certain awareness of the present moment, of our thought processes, of the sensory experience around us. Okay, so the mindfulness is the awareness. This is a definition from John Kabat-Zinn, who is oft accredited with bringing mindfulness to the Western world and into the stress reduction context. And his definition is that mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to things as they are. So we're looking at the awareness here. So this our friend here could sit on the rock and look like he's meditating, but if he's not focusing on the present moment, then that isn't practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness is the awareness that comes from that moment of closing off the senses and focusing on what is going on right now. Okay, so let's have a little look at exam stress and the brain and see why mindfulness might be able to help. So to do this, we are going to have a little trip back in time to about 70 million years ago. And our little caveman is standing here outside his cave, and there is a lion who obviously, looks quite friendly, but it's probably a bit of a threat to his survival. Okay, so he is, at this point in time, humans were only really able to think about the threat that was in front of them. Okay, so he would see a lion outside his cave and he's ready to either flee or to fight. Looks like here he's got his club out, he's ready to bump him on the head, he's ready to fight for his survival. So that's really all we did. We lived to survive. If there was a real danger in front of us, then there was a real primal instinct to protect ourselves and others in our community. Something interesting, an interesting shift happened in the way that our minds worked around this time. We suddenly began, well, not suddenly, but suddenly in historical terms, probably took a few thousand years, but we evolved to think and to plan and to be able to believe in things that didn't exist. And the reason this is crucial is because not only were we able to respond, our body was able to respond and protect us from the threat of a real predator, we could also respond to the imagined reality of a predator. So we could start to predict if we might be in danger somewhere. We could start to see if there might be a lion. So the concept of a lion in our minds as an imagined concept became, we could tell people, there's a lion down by the waterhole. I wouldn't go down there. It's not very safe. So that idea of imagining something that wasn't there in front of us, we became able to do. And the reason this is particularly important is that we, as I say, we also became able to believe in the same thing at the same time. It's why we can now have religions and Father Christmas, all kinds of things that we believe in as a society that are not necessarily real concepts on the ground, physical things we can touch, but they are something that's in our minds that we can collectively think about and bring an image into our mind. And what that meant was that we could get a sense of how we can how we needed to behave, okay? How we needed to behave to be part of a community. So from that time became perhaps a sense of social expectation, if you like. So a sense that there was a certain way you needed to behave. If you were a part of the tribe or not, if you were pulling your weight, if you were protecting others, if you were bringing in enough food, you were behaving in the sort of way that you needed to, okay? And so what's interesting there is that if we were thought to not be part of a community, then there would be no food for us and no protection from predators. So actually, isolation from the pack, if you were felt not to be part of, not to be pulling your weight, you weren't a good part of the community and the tribe, that was actually really dangerous. If anything, it was as dangerous as that threat of a lion outside your cave, that real primal reason that you were going to be that was going to threaten your existence, your survival, because you weren't going to get food and you weren't going to get protection. So adhering to societal expectations became as dangerous in the mind as being eaten by a lion. And that's so ingrained and automatic and plugged into our brains that fight or flight situation has now grown and evolved and kind of got a bit messy, because now we are in a position where the imagined threat of an exam, of not meeting requirements, of being expected to perform, has the same response in our body and our brains as the thought of being eaten by a lion. And that is why we respond in that fight or flight sense. Our body kicks in to that mode of danger and threat to survival at the thought or the presence of an exam and not meeting an expectation. So if we look at the mismatch problem that we've got here, let's look at what happens and what we need when there's a lion in front of us and what we need when there's an exam. We need from a lion to be able to run away fast. We need to be able to fight. We don't need to be able to breathe deeply. We don't need to be able to remember information. We don't need to be able to speak in sentences, particularly. You might need to give a big holler or a shout or a scream, but we don't really need to do that to use long sentences. And we don't need to think creatively. We don't need to write anything down. There's no time for that. So all of those things that we don't have the ability to do when we are in fight or flight mode and in threat mode are all of the things that we need to be able to perform well in an exam scenario. So that doesn't add up really. So we've got to do something about that and make sure that we're not in lion scared mode when we're in the exam. You'll notice though at the bottom here that there is one common feature, which is the ability to focus clearly on a goal. When you're in that adrenaline fueled state, sometimes you might notice that you're thinking really clearly. You know that you've got to get away from a certain situation. So if that's running away, your body just knows, I've got to get over there, I've got to get away. It can't think any more complex in a more complex way than that. But ultimately, that sense of clarity we can start to use in an exam situation. So it is good to feel focused, but we don't want to be so stressed that we can't access that that all the stuff that we've learnt for the exam. We can't use our language properly. And so that's something that we can find a bit of a balance with, is that there's going to be a little bit of apprehension and readiness for an exam situation, but we don't want it to be so stressful that we can't access what we need to. And scientists have noticed, in particular in that exam situation, they've actually measured stress levels during exam scenarios and found that it really does affect our memory and our ability to complete a task. Over time, high stress levels can impair the ability to form new memories. So actually, high stress levels all term or semester long could impact your performance later, because in that time when you're preparing for the exam, you might not necessarily be able to perform because you've not learnt the information that you need to learn in that preparation time. So really we need to think about calming down that stress response early on as well. So let's have a look at how mindfulness can help. I've just had a note here from somebody in the chat box saying there's a bit of an echo. on the line, do let me know if there's a problem with the sound at all for anyone else. I hope that clears up for you. So let's have a look. The reason that mindfulness can help, okay, Sylvia, thank you. Just at times, the sense of mindfulness can really help us because it takes us into what is real, not what isn't real. It's as simple as that. It takes us into a mindset where we are able to physically sense and experience directly what is around us in the present moment. And in doing so, it makes it very difficult for the not real stuff to affect us. Okay, because it becomes very clear when we're focusing on the physical moment what is actually real and what is thought process that is going on in our minds and will come and will go. Okay, it really is as simple as that. And what we can do is what this helps us with is that it actually starts to deactivate stress mode. And instead of that fight or flight mode, it activates rest or digest. So it allows all those processes that are going to waste time and are not needed when we're running away from danger, things like being able to relax the muscles, digest our food, use our words and our language, think creatively, all these things that we need, that are needed in life to thrive, but are not needed at that point of running away from danger, at that key point of survival. So we want to be able to foster that rest or digest state as much as possible. Because the more we're in fight or flight on a regular basis, the more our brain gets used to those chemicals and doesn't really know how to get back into a rest state. It also deactivates the discrepancy monitor, as we've just seen, because it allows us to focus on what's real and not on those societal expectations. And it makes it very clear whether those expectations might be affecting us once we can kind of take a step back from them. It improves it improves concentration and focus. Okay, so it also allows us to focus the mind. So the very act of practicing mindfulness is learning to bring the attention to focus on an anchor in the present moment. So that might be the breath, it might be some sensations in the body, it could even be something as simple as holding a banana, for example, and sensing what that feels like. All the things like this that bring our attention into the present moment and into direct physical experience are going to allow us to focus, and it teaches the brain what focusing feels like. So it builds up the muscles, if you like, the neural connections around that concentration ability. The brain gets used to focusing, which can only be beneficial for learning information and focusing on taking the exam. It also allows us to increase our self-compassion, because by accepting the present moment and accepting where we are, we can really find some kindness and some peace to ourselves, which again softens that sense of danger and is really important. We will be taking questions at the end, but there's one point I'd like to just respond to now. That Anna has helpfully shared a question that exams are real after all, which is really true, because exams are real. They're physical things that take place. What isn't real is the story around the exam, that fear of being able to achieve a certain result, and that sense of not meeting an expectation in an exam scenario can do to us. Okay, and so it's that fear and that expectation that can bring on stress. The exam itself is a real situation, and if we can just focus simply on what's going on in front of us, and it allows us, if we can do that in a restful way, in a relaxed way, it allows our memory to flow, it allows our language to flow, our creativity, and it allows us to perform better in that exam situation. If we don't see it as a threat, then we can perform better, ultimately. Okay, So I hope that clarifies. I thought what would be really helpful would be for us to have a go at a couple of practices that you can do with your students, just so you can, if you're not familiar with meditation and mindfulness, just to see what it feels like and what the benefits could be, and how it can help you calm down. It might not be for you. We'll just give it a go, and if you don't like it, we don't need to do it again. If you do find it helpful, then perhaps something that you can take away and use with your students. Okay, so this we're going to look at two little practices. The first one is something that will help you, that you could use with the students for say 5 minutes at the start of the class. And don't worry, we'll look at how to integrate it in a moment, after we've had our practicing. And the second one that we'll do is a little SOS practice that the student could do in a stressful situation, to actively calm themselves down right now and just take the heart rate down. Okay. So we'll take a moment, and we don't worry if you haven't got a rock and a robe and a little lake next to you. You can just sit on your chair, that's absolutely fine. I'm just sitting here in Oxfordshire on my chair, and I am able to practice meditation just fine. So I'm going to just find a nice comfortable position. Just check if your shoulders aren't all hunched up. Just lower them down, take them down, nice and soft. Perhaps draw your shoulder blades down the back. Open the chest. Rest your feet against the floor and allow your hands simply to rest into the lap wherever feels comfortable. And if you feel comfortable to do so, gently closing the eyes. If this makes you feel a bit dizzy or you don't want to close the eyes, that's okay. You can simply just take a soft gaze just down the end of the nose. So you're in your own space without too many distractions and just softening the focus. And let's take a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just notice what happens as you do that. Perhaps you feel a little bit of lift, a little bit lighter as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, seeing if the muscles might soften a bit and your energy just settles down a bit. And let's allow our attention to float very gently like a feather onto the base of the spine and to what our legs feel like against the chair. Just noticing how it feels there. And if the mind wanders, that's absolutely fine and totally normal. Simply guiding and kindly guiding your attention back to the base of the spine and how you feel sitting against the chair as soon as you notice. And also noticing your feet on the floor, noticing the spread of the feet, the contact that they're making, and seeing if there's a sense of the earth just holding you up in perfect balance. And with this grounding presence on the earth, simply taking your awareness outwards and allowing yourself to become aware of any sounds around you in the room. Noticing if you want to label them in your mind, and simply allowing them to be instead. Perhaps noticing the quality of the sound. It may be low and long and continuous, maybe short and sharp and irregular, maybe near or far away, loud or quiet. Allow the sounds simply to come and go around. Taking the attention now to the breath, going in through the nose and out again. Floating that attention to the tip of the nose and growing aware of how the air feels as it enters the nose and leaves again. Just imagining that you're seeing the air for the first time. You're seeing the breath like a child noticing it for the first time. Perhaps the air is a little bit cooler on the way in and a little bit warmer on the way out. Again, if the mind wanders, knowing that that's okay, just gently guiding the attention back to the breath as soon as you've noticed. Noticing this breath and this breath. And now simply allowing the mind to go free, to think whatever it wants to think, go wherever it wants to go. Before bringing the attention back to the sounds around you in the room, your weight against the chair and the floor. And taking a moment to notice how you feel, notice what the experience is like, without any judgment, no right or wrong. And gently opening your eyes. We'll come back together. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you feel perhaps a little calmer now. I'd love to know about your experiences of that. And that is something that we can use. If you notice that here we focused on our weight on the chair, which is a really physical sensation. We focused on the sounds around us, which are really physical sensations as well. And it also grounds us in the present moment and allows us just to accept distractions, thoughts and sounds that might drag our attention away. It allows them simply to come and to go. And then we focused on the breath going in through the nose. We focused on a very physical, focused point of where we can often feel the breath at the tips of the nostrils. Some people may feel it more prominently in another place, and that's absolutely fine. Just let your attention go to wherever it feels most prominent for you. But by inviting a curiosity into each breath, it gives us a focus for our attention as well, a slight playfulness, which can also lift our mood. Accepting distractions can take a bit of practice, and that's why we start practicing early. It's a bit like starting at a gym and starting to lift weights. We don't start with a 20 kilogram weight. You might do if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, but generally I think we'd start with something a little bit lighter, and then you build up your muscle strength over time with regular practice, and then you get to a place where you can suddenly realize you can lift stronger weights. Now, with mindfulness, it's very similar. It's a very similar practice, except that we're just building the muscles in the mind, okay, with the neural connections. We're building the grey matter and the strength around the networks that need to be active to help us with that and to help us find that calm. And it makes it easier to flip out of fight or flight mode and back into rest or digest. Okay, so let's have a little go at meditation practice, SOS. Okay, so this is a little thing that just only needs to take a minute that the student can try in the exam. and you can practice with them as well. Okay, so should we have another go? Let's just take a seat. Okay, and just perhaps imagining yourself in that exam scenario, imagining how your student might feel at this time. Heart rate might be going, mind might just be totally blank, panicking. Just close the eyes and notice our feet against the floor. And give a little wriggle in the toes, perhaps lifting the feet, peeling them up and down. Drawing our attention now, drawing your attention to the feet, grounding in this moment, allowing the feet to rest gently down and notice their contact with the floor and with the earth. Notice the contact of the legs and the sit bones and the base of the spine of the chair. Taking a big deep breath in and sighing it out, noticing the body soften. Breathing it in, finding some lightness. Breathing out to soften. And growing aware of the sounds around you for a moment before taking the attention to the breath at the nose. And following the breath into the nose and out again. Into the nose and out again. Allowing the breath now to float from the nose into the chest and out again. Floating now nose, chest, and floating down into the belly, allowing it to soften. And out again. And counting 10 breaths to yourself. Nose, chest, belly, belly, chest, nose. Nose, chest, belly, belly, chest, nose. Continuing like this, up to 10 breaths. If the mind wanders, allowing it to do so and gently guiding it to the breath as soon as you realize it's wandering. And whenever you reach the end of your 10 breaths, noticing the state of your mind, reminding yourself that everything is okay. You're doing fine. Bringing your attention back to your feet on the floor, your spine and your legs against the chair, and gently opening your eyes. Hi everybody, welcome back. So the student can take as long or as short a time as that as they might need. Obviously there's the argument that, well, there's only a certain amount of time in the exam, but equally, if there's only a certain amount of time to do work to get your answers down, and you spend most of that time panicking and can't remember any answers, then spending a minute or two just breathing and taking yourself into a more receptive and active, creative space can be a really, really useful investment of your exam time. Okay, so I hope you're all feeling even more relaxed. And let's have a look at how we could integrate this into our exam preparation courses. So as we've said, starting to develop a mindfulness or even just a centering practice, it might be, holding the pens. If you find that your students aren't really going to engage for whatever reason with sitting and breathing for a long time, then, using any kind of centering practice, just taking a moment to feel the feet on the floor and bring them into the present moment can be really helpful. However, if you feel like introducing just 5 minutes of breathing at the start of the session could be really beneficial for you, then do give it a go. There's lots of free resources that we can find online to try this with. And we've also got some resources on the Pearson International Schools community as well. So go and have a look over there that you can use. And you can also do that at the start of the lesson. You can find that it's going to really help there. Like we were looking at how stress all term long can actually affect how content is learned and memorized. Then actually having 5 minutes of breathing at the start of the class can really help center the students and get their mind into a place where they can be really receptive for what they're going to learn. And also encouraging some home practice too. It's like lifting those weights. The more practice you can do, the better for getting the mind into the right place. From an assessment point of view and preparing for the exam, we can start to reduce the feelings around the content of the exam, around the sense of discrepancy and the exam itself. We can stop it feeling like a lion outside the cave by reducing the opportunity for discrepancy and for reducing the perceived danger of an exam scenario. So the power of the word yet is a wonderful word. And what the word yet does is allows you to share with the student and for the student to say to themselves, I can't do it yet. So looking at themselves on that ruler where they are, having a sense of where they need to be, the mark that they would like to get. And rather than seeing that discrepancy and seeing this start point as a fixed place, the word yet allows them to feel, it really helps you think, well, it takes care of that discrepancy because I'm going to get there. So if we're not thinking about the discrepancy, it takes us into the present moment. If we're not worried about that discrepancy, if that sense of where we need to get to isn't a threat and a danger that needs to be worried about and worked out, we can focus on the present moment and allow that content to go in and just know that it's taken care of. I can't do it yet, but I will be able to if I keep practicing and I keep learning and I keep listening to what my teacher is sharing with me. Also, another thing that can help there is bringing in some very low pressure formative progress checks. So starting to notice, just allowing the student to have regular experience of checking their progress and checking where they are on that measuring stick without there being a threat and a massive gap, so that they can start to perhaps have some evidence that power of discrepancy is starting to be chipped away at. And they also get used to using their recall in that way. Reducing the danger of perceived in the exam scenario. Anything you can do to familiarize the students with the exam conditions that they need to sit in for the final exam will help create a safer space. So obviously there is a huge variation between the amount of control that you might have in your institution over those exam conditions, particularly if we're talking about externally validated and accredited exams. There's certain stipulations about how the room needs to be set up, etc. But you can do a lot to prepare for that. And perhaps all of those, little formative checks, if they become used to what those exam conditions feel like, then going into the room at that time won't feel like so much of a threat. If they know what's going to come, they won't be surprised by it as much, and they can help prepare themselves for what those exam conditions are going to feel like. So that the space that exam doesn't feel like a lion outside your cave. It feels like a safe space in which you can rest and really show your creativity. So anything you can do around that is really, really helpful. let's have a look at what that breathing practice could look like at the start of the lesson as well. Now, you don't need to worry if your lessons aren't on a rock by a beautiful lake in a really peaceful setting with birds tweeting all around you. As we've seen, that doesn't need to be where we can practice our breathing and our meditation. Sitting on a chair at desks is absolutely fine. I mean, of course, if you have the space and inclination and time, creating a circle in the center of the room or some space outside, that can be really lovely. But ultimately, work with what you've got. There are no rules. There's no right or wrong. All you need is some quiet space, some dedicated time, and ideally at the start of the session, it can be a really nice way to, as I say, to focus the attention and to get the mind into a state where you can really learn and absorb. And then the practice it can simply be focusing on your weight against the floor, noticing the sounds around you, allowing them to be, and counting, say, 10 breaths, 20 breaths, and just gently focusing on that and encouraging the students to gently guide their mind back as soon as they've noticed. So you could read out a practice like that, or you could find a recording that works for your classroom, and encourage them to be practicing at school as well, at home, sorry. But it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Afterwards, one thing I should say is you might find it helpful for that to happen in the L1, if English obviously isn't their first language. They might find it easier to practice that in their first language. But equally, it can be a really helpful thing maybe to bring into practice into your conversation practice as well. It might be a listening exercise that you can do as well. And the conversation that you might have afterwards could bring some really useful conversation practice and discussion into your lesson. So you could even bring it into practice of English as well. But if you're doing it in the L1, then it's still really useful to have a little bit of inquiry, a little bit of asking them after they've been breathing, how what they noticed, so that they can start to become aware of their experience and how it might be benefiting them. They might have some observations about what actually they've been worrying about that they realise that they didn't need to be. It's just useful for them, just to sit and objectively, non-judgmentally, just give them the space to share what they've experienced. They say there's no right or wrong, um, but it can be really helpful. You might even want to give them a little journal or notebook that they can keep note of their observations, so that they can see how perhaps their mindset might be shifting a little bit as well. So now we've got a little bit of time for some questions. So I would love to hear your thoughts and any questions you might have about what we've talked about today, or perhaps what we haven't covered but like you'd like to ask more about. So just pop them in the chat box and fire away. Just gonna have a check through and see if you had any questions. One coming. Seen somewhere here that it can depend on what the distraction is, of course. I mean, you sometimes see people like meditating in the middle of busy shopping centres. That's a very advanced practice. But using distractions, there will be distractions sometimes in exam settings, and I think someone's particularly said about autistic students that can be challenging. So just allowing them to notice distractions rather than needing to spiral their thoughts off to an association with them. Simply allowing those distractions to be, and to come and go, because their thoughts will do exactly the same thing. They will come and they will go, a bit like clouds across a blue sky. Allowing those distractions to be something that comes and goes for them without needing to follow them. Okay, it doesn't look like we have too many questions, but lots of thank yous. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you also for being here and sharing this session with me today. If you have, someone's made an interesting point there, Violetta. Practicing will help students get used to it and us too. That's a really good point. Practicing this yourself can make, your students see that you practice it. If you practice it yourself, you really can start to notice the benefits, and that makes it so much easier to communicate those benefits to your students and help guide them through their practice as well. Um, um, So yeah, I think I'm very excited for what you might share with your students going forward, and I'm very grateful for your questions. I just spotted one more here. What about younger learners? Younger learners can be great. I mean, the earlier you can start, the better. You might find that some simpler practices work for little ones. So maybe if they're at the age where they've got a teddy in class with them, that maybe they could hold the teddy on their tummy and simply notice it going up and down as they breathe. Or you could even put their hands on their tummies and notice their hands going up and down. Okay, and that can be a really helpful way as well, just to bring their focus into something. Or you can ask them to imagine, if you're using the breath counting, you can ask them to imagine perhaps as a little person with some binoculars at their nostrils, watching the air going in and out, and that helps get the idea of observing the breath without needing to be in their thoughts. Okay, so as I say, there's some recordings on the International Global Schools community page as well, but there's much more information, all the handouts as well, and blog posts on english.com/exam prep. So please head over there and see what you can find. But it's been lovely to see you. We have another session at 3 p.m. UK time. So if there's anybody else you know who missed this session, you can either share the recording with them when it comes through, or you could direct them for that session. Okay. Bye bye everybody, and take care.